So activities-based costing is similar to volume-based costing, or in other words, job costing, in that it is a way of distinguishing exactly how much overhead goes towards a certain product. However, unlike job costing, which uses just one allocation base, activities-based costing looks at all of the overhead incurring activities a company does and looks at all of those overheads and uses an individual cost driver for each activity and uses the all of that to kind of split up the overhead for each activity into each product. So to do this and to work with activities-based costing, you just have to kind of create this simple graph down here. And it's just a list of 7 steps that we'll walk through. So step number 1 is just to write out what the activity is. So common activities that we have listed here are material purchases, machine setups, product packaging, and inspections. Now, for this example, I'm going to continuously kind of mention inspections because this is probably one of my favorite activities to reference just because I think it's easy to understand. So, the second step is to write down the total activity cost, or in other words, the total manufacturing overhead cost incurred by that activity. So for inspections, let's just kind of say that inspections costed this company $300. So step 3 is just to write out in words what is the cost driver. So what determines the amount of overhead that this activity is going to incur. So each added cost driver incurs more overhead. For materials purchases, it's number of purchase orders. For machine setups, it's number of batches. So each batch is going to need another setup of machines. And for inspections, it's number of inspections. So each inspection that you do is going to cost money, is going to incur overhead. So number 4 is just to figure out what is the total quantity of that cost driver for each activity. Now, they may just give these to you, but oftentimes they'll make it a little more complicated. So a question may say something like this. In the case of inspections, they may say there are 2 products, product A and product B. They may say the units for product A are 20 units, so you're making 20 product A's and you're making 60 product B's. And they may say the inspections per unit, so the inspections per unit for product A are 2. So each product A requires 2 inspections, and each product B requires only 1 inspection. So for step 4, you just need to figure out the total number of cost drivers, and in the case of inspections, the total number of inspections incurred by the company for these products. So to do this, you're just going to first find A. So if you're making 20 A's and 2 inspections per A, you know that A is going to require 40 inspections in total. And B, because it takes 60 units, there are 60 UVs that were made, and each B only requires 1 inspection, then B is going to have 60 inspections. So therefore, you know that there were a total of 100 inspections incurred by the company throughout this time. So that is step 4. Step 5 is just make a rate based off of that driver. So step 5 is just step 2 divided by step 4. So it is the total overhead cost of each activity divided by the total cost driver quantity of each activity. So in this case, we said inspections costed a total of $300 and that there were 100 total inspections incurred by the company. So therefore, the rate is $3 per inspection. So I'm just going to clean this up. $3 per inspection. Now, step 6 is kind of broken into 2 parts. You want to apply it to product A and apply that rate to product B. So again, based off of step 5, we know that our rate is $3 per inspection. And we already figured out from step 4 that A uses 4 inspections. Therefore, A requires 40 times $3 per inspection. So A incurred $120 in overhead from inspections. Whereas B took 60 inspections, and at $3 per inspection, that's just 60 times 3, means that B incurred $180 of overhead from inspections. So one thing to note is that this total overhead cost from inspections was simply broken up into parts A and B. So to double check your work, you can always do this. You can always say, okay, does A plus B's overhead equal the total overhead for that activity? If so, then you are on a good track. If not, then you know you made a mistake somewhere. However, there is one exception to this rule. If there are more products that this company makes, such as product C and D, then the sum of A and B won't equal the total overhead cost, because some of the total overhead cost will also go to product C and D. So that is an exception to this rule. So those are steps 1 through 6. So the final step is step 7. And we're going to put that down here. So we figured out the overhead from inspections that goes to product A and B. Now we just need to do that for each one of these activities overheads. We need to apply them to A and to B by following these same steps. At the very end, we're just going to take all of the overhead from A, add it together to find the total overhead for A, and then we're going to add up all the overhead costs for B, add them together to find the total overhead cost for B. And again, except for that special exception, the sum of these two total costs for A and B should equal the sum of all the overheads for all the activities. So that is how you allocate overhead based off of activities-based costing. Now, as you may have noticed, this is a little more work than job costing. So the trade-off is you are doing more work. However, you do this because it is more accurate than job costing, because you're using multiple cost drivers that accurately depict how much overhead each product or each unit is using. So some common questions that you'll be asked using ABC are the unit cost of item A. So first of all, the cost of an item, or the total manufacturing cost, again, is just direct materials plus DL plus overhead. And then to find overhead in these types of questions, you're going to want to use that ABC system. But because it says unit cost, you're going to have to divide that by the total number of units produced. Now, another type of question that they're going to ask you on the exam, most likely, is the unit gross margin for item A. Now, remember, gross margin is just the revenue per unit minus the cost of goods sold. So all you're going to have to do is take the revenue per unit, which is also the price, and then subtract the answer that you found above. So those are two common questions they may ask you. Now, the third type of question that they may ask you is to compare job costing and ABC costing. So to do this, all you need to do is find the overhead for all the products using both of the techniques, and then just see how far off they are from each other. Now, one thing to note is that generally within these problems, you don't actually have to go back and do all of these complex steps for job costing. But instead, whenever you need to do the job costing portion, you can use these simplified steps. So instead of worrying about budgeted and estimated and actual and applied overhead, you really just need to find the rate, which is just total overhead divided by total allocation base, and then find the amount of overhead that was applied to the product based off of the product's allocation base and that overhead rate. So you don't really have to focus as much on budgeted, estimated, all that stuff whenever you're doing job costing under an ABC problem. So you don't have to worry about it, luckily. So again, that is all of ABC. You're most likely not going to be given this graph. However, you can include it on your cheat sheet and you can simply draw it out yourself. They may give you parts of it, but all in all, I would recommend just drawing out the rest of the graph, or at least writing down the steps so that you know what you're doing and you can follow them concisely and easily. So otherwise, that is pretty much all you need to know about activities-based costing.